You're here for a reason. Maybe you can't explain exactly why, but something inside you brought you to this moment. And I want you to do something simple yet powerful before you continue listening. Write in the comments now, exactly like this. Today, I decide to live with discipline and open the doors to prosperity in my life. Don't write out of habit. Write as if making a pact. Every word you declare with intention transforms into energy. And all energy, when directed with faith, creates movement. This is your first act of power, declaring that discipline will guide your days from now on. Perhaps you felt your life is repeating the same cycle. You work, you strive, you pay bills, and in the end everything seems the same. It's as if something invisible is draining your progress. But what if I told you the problem isn't outside, but inside? That the difference between continuing to struggle and finally prospering lies in a simple adjustment of consciousness. Because the real secret isn't luck, it isn't talent, and it isn't even effort. It's discipline, the ability to bring order where there was previously chaos. For centuries, the Jewish people have upheld a principle that underpins all that is prosperous. Wealth is a consequence of spiritual order. It's not a prize, it's a reflection. When there is order within, there is abundance without. And that is why, even when persecuted, expelled, and forced to start from scratch at so many points in history, they always rose again. In each new country, in each new challenge, the same strength manifested itself, the strength of discipline. Think about it. What makes someone who has lost everything rise again so many times? It wasn't the gold, it wasn't the connections, it was the way of thinking. It was the awareness that money comes and goes, but the domain, it remains. The house can be taken, but the inner wisdom, everything that is built with purpose and consistency, flourishes again, sooner or later. The modern world teaches the opposite. Follow your impulses, do what you feel, live in the moment, and that's exactly what imprisons people. Because desire is never satisfied, it always demands more. Have you noticed that? A new cell phone, new clothes, a momentary pleasure, and soon after the same feeling of emptiness. It's a never-ending cycle. And those who live enslaved by impulse become prisoners of lack. But those who learn to master their own desires discover something extraordinary, freedom. And it is from this freedom that true prosperity is born. Discipline is not a prison, it is liberation. Because it teaches you to choose what really matters and to say no to what only distracts you. The ancient sages used to say, "The man who masters himself is more powerful than he who conquers a city." And this phrase is more relevant than ever. Today, we live surrounded by temptations, haste, and comparisons. Everyone wants the result. No one wants the process. But the truth is simple. There is no harvest without sowing, and there is no sowing without discipline. Prosperity is not an event, it's a consequence. It doesn't happen suddenly. It grows silently every day, in every choice, in every decision you make, even when no one is watching. And that's where the power of discipline manifests itself. When you decide not to be guided by what you feel, but by what you know is right. Ancient texts say that God doesn't give wealth ready-made. He gives it the power to generate wealth, and that power is within you now. It's in every choice you make. In every moment you choose consistency over haste, focus over distraction, purpose over impulse. Imagine a life where every penny that comes in and goes out has meaning. Every action is done with purpose, and every achievement is the result of awareness. That is prosperity. Because prosperity is not about having more. It's knowing how to take better care of what you already have. And if you still think the secret lies in working harder, running faster, producing non-stop, look at those who have already made it. How many of them are at peace? How many sleep soundly? True prosperity is not measured by numbers, but by balance. Discipline is what transforms work into purpose, money into blessing, and routine into wisdom. It's what connects the spiritual to the material, the invisible to the concrete. And perhaps you've never heard this so clearly. Money isn't the problem. The problem is who controls it. Today, you took the first step. By writing that sentence at the beginning, something began to change because you did what few have the courage to do, to declare a decision in the face of the invisible. And decisions like these move mountains. But there is something even deeper that you need to understand. There is an ancient and almost forgotten way of looking at wealth, a sacred way of dealing with money that changes everything. It is the point where faith meets reason and discipline becomes a bridge to abundance. And that's what you're about to understand. True prosperity begins the moment you understand that money is merely a reflection, a mirror of what exists within you. If there is inner turmoil, there will be disorder in your finances. If there is clarity, there will be growth. What differentiates those who prosper from those who struggle is how each relates to the invisible power that money holds. And this power is not material, it is spiritual. The Torah teaches something that completely changes the way you see life. Remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the power to generate wealth. God doesn't deliver ready-made wealth. He delivers the power, and that power comes in the form of wisdom, purpose, and discipline. That's why some build empires and others, even with similar opportunities, fail to get anywhere. The difference lies in who has learned to govern the power they have received. Money is neither good nor bad, it's neutral. It simply amplifies who you already are. If there is order within you, it flows and grows. If there is emptiness, it escapes, disappears, and becomes a burden. The problem isn't having too little or too much, it's not knowing what to do with what you have. Imagine a person who works all month, but on the first weekend after payday feels an almost uncontrollable urge to spend. They buy things they don't need, seeking immediate pleasure, and the following week they already feel the anguish of regret. This cycle repeats month after month. The problem isn't the salary, it's the internal pattern. They don't spend out of necessity, they spend to fill a void. And this void is never satisfied. It's what the wise called the inner beast, the limitless desire, the appetite that is never satiated. Now think of another person. They earn the same, work the same amount, but choose to act differently. Before spending, they breathe. They write it down. They wait a day before buying. They ask themselves, do I really need this, or do I just want to distract myself from something I'm feeling? This person may not be richer on paper, but they are already spiritually prosperous because they have learned to control their impulses. And that's where the cycle changes. When desire obeys conscience, money obeys order. Jewish sages have always viewed money as a form of spiritual energy. And like all energy, it needs to be channeled. A river without banks becomes a flood and destroys everything in its path. But when it has limits, it irrigates, generates life and fertility. Money works the same way. Without discipline, it becomes chaos. With discipline, it transforms into a blessing. There is an old story told in Jewish communities about a merchant who once asked his master, "Why do some become rich and others do not, if both work with the same dedication?" The master replied, "Because one works out of fear and the other out of purpose. The first seeks to survive, the second seeks to serve." The merchant didn't understand immediately. Then the master added, "Fear makes a man cling to what he has. Purpose makes him multiply it." This is the essence of prosperity, understanding that money wasn't made to be hoarded out of fear, but to be managed wisely. It needs to circulate, but consciously. When it's used to create, help, and balance, it returns multiplied. When it's used to hide fear, it dries up. And that is why, within Jewish tradition, there is something sacred called Shabbat, a day when everything stops. No sales, no business, no movement. It is the moment when one declares, "Money does not govern me, I govern money." On the outside, it looks like just a day of rest, but on the inside, it's spiritual training. It's a symbol of mastery. It's when a man shows that the value of life is not in what he produces, but in who he is. Can you imagine what it means, in the midst of a busy routine, to stop and trust? Not to stop out of laziness, but out of conviction. It's an attitude that defies logic. To stop when the world is rushing by is an act of faith, and it is this kind of faith that attracts prosperity. Because those who trust show the universe that they don't need to control everything, only to act with wisdom. A businessman once told me something I'll never forget. He said, "When I started, I thought the more I worked, the richer I would become. So I worked until I got sick. I had money, but I lost my peace. One day I realized I was trapped by something that claimed to set me free. That's when I decided to change. I started setting aside one day a week to stop, give thanks, plan and give. I didn't earn more overnight, but I began to lose the fear of losing. And without realizing it, the money started flowing more freely. This is the hidden secret in balance. Those who live in anxiety block the flow. Those who live in order release it. Money is like water. It always seeks a firm container, and that container is your mind. If it's full of holes, fear, haste, guilt, it leaks. But if it's aligned with gratitude, awareness, and purpose, it accumulates, irrigates, and generates abundance. Prosperity doesn't begin when money arrives. It begins when fear disappears, and fear disappears when there is inner order. That's why discipline is a form of prayer. Every conscious choice is a silent prayer saying, "I trust, I am capable, I am prepared." Today, I want you to remember this. Striving is a spiritual act. It's about aligning the visible with the invisible, work with purpose, action with faith. And perhaps the real secret has never been about earning more, but about using what you already have wisely, respecting time, balance, and the value that money holds. Lasting prosperity doesn't spring from haste, it springs from peace. And when that peace settles in, money ceases to be a burden and becomes an instrument, a means to fulfill your purpose and bless those around you. It is at this point that wealth ceases to be a number and becomes a vibration. And those who live in this vibration never return to their previous state, because they finally understand that the power to generate wealth does not come from outside. It has always been within. Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you've made decisions driven by impulse? That sudden desire to buy something, to satisfy a whim that lasts only a few seconds and then leaves an even greater void. It is in this small interval between wanting and doing that lies the difference between those who prosper and those who repeat the same mistakes. The disciplined mind sees the impulse and transforms it into awareness. The scattered mind obeys the impulse and calls it freedom. But freedom without control is merely a sophisticated form of slavery. Discipline is the art of delaying immediate gratification to achieve something greater and more lasting. It's a silent, almost invisible force that builds empires while the rest of the world seeks shortcuts. The secret is understanding that every time you overcome an unnecessary desire, you are training the most powerful part of your soul, the part that decides your destiny. Ancient sages said that human beings live between two voices, instinct and conscience. One shouts, the other whispers. Prosperity is born when you learn to listen to the whisper. But how do you transform this concept into something real, practical, and everyday? The first step is simple. Observe. Don't try to change everything at once, but simply observe the moment when the desire appears. For example, you are about to buy something and you feel that excitement mixed with haste. Stop for a few seconds, breathe. Ask yourself, do I want this or am I trying to fill a void? Just the act of asking yourself this question already changes the mental pattern. You have stopped being a slave to reaction and have become the observer of your own impulse. What if you discovered that true power lies not in having more, but in to stop needing so much? This is the turning point that changes everything. Modern humans live surrounded by stimuli, advertisements, screens, comparisons. Each one says, you will only be happy when you have this. And so people spend their lives chasing what they don't need, accumulating what they can't enjoy, and losing what they have most precious, peace. Discipline is the path back to what is essential. There's an ancient principle that says, he who conquers himself never loses anything, even when the world collapses. This isn't philosophy, it's spiritual survival. History shows this time and again. Families who lost everything and yet rebuilt their lives from scratch. Why? Because what they valued most wasn't kept in vaults, it was within them. Knowledge, organization, faith, purpose. While the world chases after gold, they chase after the wisdom that generates gold. Now stop for a moment and reflect. How many times have you had a good idea, a talent, an opportunity, but let it slip away due to a lack of consistency? How many times have you started something and not finished it? That's exactly what separates the dreamer from the builder. The first is driven by emotion, the second by discipline. And when you learn to act even without the will to, the universe begins to respond differently. In Jewish tradition, there is a concept called Yetzer Hara, the inclination toward imbalance. It is part of all of us. It's the voice that says, buy it now, leave it for tomorrow. You deserve this. This voice is not the enemy. It is the soul's training ground, because every time you overcome it, you strengthen the spiritual muscle of discipline. Self-mastery is like training. The more you practice, the easier it becomes to resist the impulse. But what would happen if you dedicated only a whole day? How can you practice this awareness? Imagine a day when you decide to observe your desires, postpone unnecessary spending, and put self-control into practice. Imagine how much money, energy, and clarity could arise in just 24 hours. What if that single day became the beginning of a new way of living? The power of transformation lies precisely in this, in small decisions repeated with awareness. There was a man who decided to test this principle. He was an ordinary professional, always complaining about not being able to save money. One day, after hearing a lecture on spiritual financial discipline, he decided to conduct the experiment. Today, I will not spend anything that is not essential. That day, he realized how many times he almost bought something unnecessary. An expensive coffee, a shirt he wouldn't wear, an item that was just compensating for stress. In the end, he wrote down on a piece of paper how much he had saved. The amount was small, but the impact was enormous. He discovered that what needed to change was not his income, but his behavior. Now think, how many times do you sabotage yourself without realizing it? How many opportunities for growth are lost because you can't wait for the right time? Haste makes waste. Money flows to those who have patience. It flees from those who live in anxiety. Therefore, learning to wait is one of the most spiritual acts that exist. Waiting is not inaction, it's trust. The wise used to say that whoever masters desire for a day gains control for a lifetime. This is because discipline is not an event, it's an invisible construction. Every time you choose balance, something within you aligns with the order of the universe. And when the inner self is aligned, the outer self begins to reflect it. Prosperity is the natural result of harmony between what you feel, what you think, and what you do. But this harmony only happens when there is enough inner silence to hear the right voice. And discipline creates that silence. It separates the noise from the essential, the impulse from the purpose. Think about how many areas of your life are crying out for order: finances, relationships, health, time. Lack of discipline is the invisible thread that connects all imbalances. But the good news is that you only need to start with a single conscious choice for the pattern to break. Discipline isn't about restriction, it's about freedom. It's the power to decide your own path, to not be guided by the chaos of the world. And every time you say no to impulse, you're saying yes to your purpose. The result is inevitable: clarity, prosperity, and peace. What many call a miracle is, in fact, the natural effect of discipline combined with faith. When you choose what is right repeatedly, the universe responds. The impossible becomes accessible, the improbable becomes routine. And it is at this point that the invisible begins to work in your favor. Therefore, the question now is not how to change your life, but how much longer will you continue living without mastering yourself? Because the power to generate wealth, peace, and abundance is already within you. And the key has always been the same: the discipline that transforms impulse into wisdom and desire into purpose. There is a powerful concept that few people know about: Q&As. This is the time the brain needs to begin creating new connections and transforming a behavior into a habit. In just 3 weeks, something that seemed difficult begins to feel natural. This is why Jewish wisdom teaches that 21 is the number of transformation, the cycle where intention becomes identity. It's the point where discipline ceases to be effort and becomes part of who you are. But what happens when someone actually decides to live with that consistency? We're not talking about theory, but something real and tested. In 2009, researchers at University College London discovered that, on average, it takes 66 days to consolidate a new habit, but that the most noticeable changes happen in first 3 weeks. It is during this period that the mind ceases to resist and begins to cooperate. Now imagine applying this spiritual and scientific principle to the field of prosperity. What would happen if, for 21 days, you lived consciously, observing your impulses, mastering your desires, and practicing gratitude and generosity? The answer is simple. You would reprogram the way your mind understands money, because prospering isn't just about doing more, but about thinking differently. The human brain is malleable, and each choice creates a new neural pathway. When you choose discipline through repetition, you are literally redesigning the internal map that governs your actions. There's an old story about a Jewish scholar who once realized he was spending too much energy trying to change big things all at once. So he decided to choose just one small habit to practice consistently, saving 1 coin a day. That's all. At first it seemed insignificant, but over time, the act became symbolic. He began to see the value of consistency, the satisfaction of keeping his promise to himself. After a year, he realized he didn't just have money saved, he had a new mindset. Now think about this applied to your daily life. What if, for the next 21 days, you decided to record everything you avoid impulse spending on? A coffee, an unnecessary purchase, a subscription you don't even use. It seems like a small amount, but the impact is surprising. Research shows that the average Brazilian spends up to 30% of their salary on impulse purchases. This means that, in a year, almost 4 months of work are lost on decisions that don't bring real value. Imagine what would happen if that energy were redirected with purpose. A disciplined mind begins to perceive money not as something that comes and goes, but as a tool for building. And when you associate spiritual practice with material practice, something extraordinary happens. Money begins to flow easily, without guilt, without fear. Balance is established. Jewish tradition calls this shalom, bayit, peace is born from order within the home. It's not about ostentatious wealth, but about living in harmony, knowing when to act and when to stop, when to save and when to give. But why exactly 21 days and not less? Because it's enough time to break down internal resistance. In the first few days, the brain tries to revert to the old pattern. It says, you don't need this, leave it for tomorrow. A small exception won't make a difference. But with each day you choose to stand firm, the voice of the old pattern grows weaker. And when day 21 arrives, something changes. You no longer need to force yourself because the new behavior becomes natural. It's as if the soul and mind finally walk in the same direction. There's an experiment conducted with a group of athletes in Tel Aviv that perfectly illustrates this. For 21 days, they were instructed to record their daily habits of discipline, from the time they woke up to small self-control decisions. The goal was simple, to observe their own behavior without judgment. The result surprised the researchers. At the end of the period, 87% reported not only improved physical performance, but also greater mental clarity, less anxiety, and a sense of self-mastery. The experiment proved what the ancient rabbis already taught. External discipline begins in the mind, but ends in the spirit. Perhaps you think that 21 days aren't enough to change an entire life, but what if I told you that your whole life changes when you decide to start a single day? Because it's not about the length of time, but about the quality of the decision. 3 weeks of conscious choices have more power than years of empty promises. A man once said, "I've tried everything and nothing worked." The mentor replied, "You've tried everything except perseverance." Perseverance is the true test of faith. It's easy to start enthusiastically. The hard part is continuing when the enthusiasm fades. But that's where the gold lies. It's in that interval between wanting and persisting that spiritual discipline transforms into lasting prosperity. And there's something even deeper in this process. When you spend 21 days practicing self-control, giving, and reflection, the universe begins to respond. Small coincidences become signs, doors open, opportunities appear. This isn't mysticism, it's alignment. You stop acting as a victim of circumstances and start acting as a co-author of your own life. If you think this is an exaggeration, consider how many areas of the world demonstrate the power of consistency. Athletes who train every day even when they don't feel like it. Musicians who repeat scales until they perfect them. Students who review the same material until they master it. The principle is the same. Discipline creates mastery, and mastery attracts abundance. For 21 days, each decision is an invisible brick in the construction of your new reality. And at the end of this cycle, something within you changes forever. You realize that money, time, and opportunities have always been around you. They were just waiting for you to be ready to manage them. Discipline is what transforms maybe someday into I've already started. It's the link between intention and manifestation. And when you practice it with purpose, the impossible ceases to be a distant idea and begins to become a logical sequence of consequences. Everything falls into place. Everything makes sense because 21 days are not just a challenge, they are a door, and whoever goes through it is never the same again. There are stories that seem simple, but they hold within them profound secrets about what it truly means to prosper. One of them tells of a Jewish merchant who many centuries ago was expelled from his land along with thousands of families. He left everything behind, his home, his possessions, his belongings. All he could carry was a small notebook, a record of debts and lessons learned from his old shop. When he arrived in a new country, without knowing anyone and without speaking the local language, he started over. But what impressed the people around him most was his calmness. While everyone complained about their fate, he worked in silence, with focus, discipline, and faith. They say that for every coin he earned, he set aside a portion, however small, to help someone in need. Many mocked him for it. "How can you give when you barely have enough for yourself?" they would ask. And he would reply, "He who learns to give when he has little prepares himself to manage when he has much." Over time, that man rebuilt his life. He set up a small business, prospered, created jobs, and helped support an entire community. When asked what his secret was, he would smile and say, "The discipline of not spending when the heart desires, and the courage to give when the mind fears." This same principle is repeated in thousands of real stories, both past and present. Entire families have escaped debt and rebuilt their stability simply by changing how they dealt with money and desires. Recent records show that people who develop the habit of tracking their expenses and regularly practicing charity have up to 60% lower levels of financial stress and a greater sense of purpose. It's something simple but powerful. When money ceases to be merely an end and becomes a means to something greater, it finds its way back in abundance. There was also the story of a family living in debt, unsure how to break the cycle. Every month, their salary disappeared in just a few days. They blamed themselves, argued, and anxiety became routine, until one day, they decided to do something different. They created a discipline notebook. The rule was simple. For an entire day, no one would spend anything that wasn't absolutely essential. At first, it seemed like a game, but that night, when they noted how much they had wasted on small purchases, they realized something that changed everything. The problem wasn't a lack of money, it was a lack of awareness. Gradually, this small gesture transformed into a new lifestyle. They began postponing purchases for 24 hours, discussing things before spending, and setting aside a portion of everything they earned for donation. The result was unexpected. Debts began to disappear, arguments lessened, and a new feeling took over the house: lightness. They discovered that prosperity doesn't begin with abundance, but with order. And if you stop to think about it, It's the same with everything. Disorder is what creates scarcity. Internal chaos manifests itself in all areas, in finances, in relationships, in health. But discipline brings structure, and structure creates growth. Money is just a reflection of the energy you carry. When there is gratitude and purpose, it flows. When there is fear and haste, it stagnates. Many entrepreneurs who are now examples of success started from nothing, but they carried an unwavering conviction. Never stop giving, even during times of scarcity. One of them, owner of one of the largest family businesses in New York, recounted that in the beginning, he set aside $1 a week to donate. No matter how much he earned, that part was sacred. Charity, he said, is the invisible wall that protects my business. Decades later, his company prospered amidst crises that brought down others around it. Coincidence? Perhaps. But in the Jewish tradition, nothing is a coincidence, it's a consequence. True prosperity is built on 3 pillars: discipline, consistency, and generosity. These 3 principles create a spiritual alliance that transforms how you relate to life. Every time you control an impulse, you create strength. Every time you maintain consistency, you create stability. And every time you give, you create flow. It's a cycle. Discipline opens the way, consistency maintains it, and generosity multiplies it. Now imagine if this pattern were applied on a large scale. If each person decided even today to live with a little more discipline and purpose. If each family dedicated a moment of the week to review expenses, give thanks, and donate. The statistics would change drastically. Personal debt would fall, well-being would increase, and money would cease to be a source of guilt, becoming instead an instrument of transformation. You might think this is idealism, but it's not. It's spiritual physics. Everything that moves with order generates balance. Everything that moves with purpose generates multiplication. And everything that moves with gratitude returns amplified. That's why those who live with discipline rarely return to chaos. They understand that every choice carries a seed, and that every seed planted consciously blossoms in due time. And perhaps the most surprising point of all is this: prospering is not about accumulating, it's about transforming. Money that sits idle rots, while money that flows with purpose multiplies. True wealth is not measured by what you possess, but by the impact you generate. And that impact begins with the small, invisible decisions of everyday life. When you choose to wait, when you decide to be grateful, when you choose to give instead of withholding. In the end, it's simple, but nobody teaches you this in school. To prosper is to align mind, emotion, and action. It's about living consciously. It's understanding that every penny that passes through your hands is an opportunity to build, not just to consume. It's this perspective that changes everything. The merchant of the past, the indebted family, the entrepreneur who started with $1, they all discovered the same principle: money obeys those who live with purpose. And if there's one thing you should take away from all of this, it's that discipline is the language of prosperity. It speaks of consistency, faith, and mastery. And when you learn this language, the entire universe begins to respond in the same tongue. Everything that was difficult becomes possible. Everything that seemed distant begins to draw closer. Because true abundance is not in how much you have, but in how much you have become capable of managing. There comes a point in life when it's no longer enough to listen, learn, or understand. Action is necessary. Words can inspire, but only action transforms. And perhaps that's the true meaning of everything you've heard so far. To awaken within you the power to transform knowledge into movement, faith into practice, intention into results. Because what separates those who dream from those who prosper is just one decision: the decision to begin. Throughout this journey, you've heard about discipline, purpose, and prosperity. But now it's time to bring it all together into a simple, real plan. No grand promises or impossible changes. Just steps that, if consistently repeated, can alter the course of your life. First, define a financial and spiritual purpose. Don't just ask, how much do I want to have, but what do I want to have it for? When money has a purpose, it gains direction. Write down on a piece of paper what you want to build. Peace for your family, security, free time, the ability to help. Visualize this every day. The brain needs a clear image to act, and the soul needs intention to remain. Second, practice what we call the 3 daily gestures of discipline. The first gesture is notice. Before any purchase, pause for 10 seconds. Breathe and ask yourself, is this essential or emotional? The honest answer brings clarity. The second gesture is registrar. Write down everything you spend and everything you save. This simple practice creates awareness and over time changes behavior. The third gesture is only giving a small portion, always, to something or someone in need. Donation breaks the fear of scarcity and opens space for the flow of abundance. Third, establish the 21-day ritual for 3 weeks. Commit to practicing these 3 gestures without interruption. If you fail one day, start again the next. Strength lies not in never falling, but in always starting over. At the end of the cycle, you will realize that controlling your desires will no longer be a struggle. It will be natural. What once seemed like effort will become balance. Fourth, apply the principle of productive silence. Set aside at least 5 minutes each day to disconnect from external noise. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and reflect on what you learned and experienced that day. Ask yourself, did I act with discipline today? Was I faithful to the purpose I declared? This small space for introspection is where the soul converses with the spirit. It is there that transformation happens. Fifth, build a strategic gratitude routine before going to sleep. Write down 3 things you were grateful for during the day, no matter how small. Gratitude is the soil where prosperity flourishes. It changes your internal vibration and teaches your brain to recognize abundance instead of lack. Those who learn to be grateful for the little things prepare their hearts to receive much. And lastly, but perhaps most importantly, keep your promises to yourself. Trust in God begins with trust in yourself. Every time you promise something and don't keep it, you lose strength. But when you do keep your promises, even in small things, you create power. Because prosperity is, above all, a relationship of trust between you and the divine, between you and your word. Perhaps you think it's too late, that you've made too many mistakes, or that your moment has passed. But there is no such thing as too late when it comes to purpose. The right time is when consciousness awakens. And if you've come this far, it's because your consciousness is already ready. Nothing was in vain. No fall, no loss, no doubt. Everything has brought you to this point where knowledge ceases to be information and becomes a path. And when you begin to walk this path, something subtle will happen. You will notice that money ceases to be the center of your worries and becomes a consequence of balance. Doors that seemed closed begin to open. Opportunities that you didn't see before begin to appear. And the most surprising thing, you will feel peace. Because prosperity without peace is just accumulation, but prosperity with peace is fulfillment. Now, I want to invite you to do something that can change not only your day, but your destiny. If this content touched your heart, if any word resonated with you, show it through action. Subscribe to this channel because each new video will be a new key to your growth. Leave your like, not just as support, but as a sign that you choose to continue on this path of wisdom. And write in the comments what you felt, what you learned, or what you want to change. You can remain anonymous if you prefer. This is a safe space where each shared experience helps others find light in their own process. You are not alone. We are all learning to live with more discipline, faith, and purpose. And if you've come this far, it's because the Eternal One is already calling you to a new cycle, a cycle of order, balance, and true prosperity. May the words you heard today not remain merely in your mind, but descend into your heart and transform into action. Because life changes when you change, and the key that unlocks the doors to prosperity is already in your hands.